Hello and welcome to episode 41 of Driver Suit Blog Radio. As always, I'm your host, David G. Firestone. I've got some news stories for this week, and we start with the possibility of a Dodge return to NASCAR. Now, as reported by a website called Mopar Insiders, Dodge has been trying to talk to RCR, which is historically a Chevy team since 2013. Now, they also reported that Dodge has been in talks with NASCAR about a return to the sport. Now, Mopar Insiders, no disrespect, but they don't seem like the most reliable of sources. However, the Sports Business Journal is another story entirely. Their take on the story is that the talks in question have fully stalled. According to Sports Business Journal, Dodge has stated that they are focused on drag racing and a return to NASCAR is off the table. NASCAR, on the other hand, has stated that they are very interested in a fourth manufacturer, and outside of Dodge, I really don't know who that could be. And I'm saying just off the top of my head, there really isn't anyone else it could be. I think Dodge staying out of NASCAR for the time being is a good move on their part, but I'm not ruling that they're not going to come back at some point. I don't think right now is the time for that to happen. So, we move to the Chicago street race. Now, I've been very vocal about why I think it's not going to work. A lot of people agree with me. But I've had a theory that I haven't really talked about that much that was proven true the other day. Now, I thought the Chicago street race might be a gateway to other NASCAR street races, and an article on J-Ski, link in the description, proved me right. According to that article, which is a slimmed-down Sports Business Journal article, NASCAR actually is interested in having talks with other cities about more street races. What I don't get here is that this is an experiment that hasn't fully been completed yet, and we don't know the results. Never mind the fact that, and I'll get into this in a few minutes, they've had to modify the Gen 7 car, because of some issues that have led to driver injuries. But we'll get to that in a few minutes. There is no real way to elegantly test the cars on the track prior to the event, so this could be awesome, or it could be a repeat of the 2008 Brickyard 400. But for NASCAR to jump the gun like this, not knowing if this is going to work or not, is kind of baffling. You haven't performed the experiment yet you're pulling the trigger on expanding the experiment, is basically what they're saying. I think I think a more racing-oriented area of the country, southern, maybe Charlotte, North Carolina, maybe Miami, maybe California, which has a much bigger NASCAR fan base than Chicago does, would have been a better move here. In the approach that they're taking with the street race, as I've said before, it comes across almost as if it jams, forced it, if it breaks, it needed fixing anyway, type of approach. I hope for the best with this, but I really am expecting the worst, and I don't have any idea how this is going to work out. And again, I'm not going. I don't know how much the tickets are, but it's too much for me. Now, I am saying that I'm open to the possibility of going to Route 66 next year because it was just announced that they're opening back up, but the street race, unless somebody gives me a ticket, I'm not going. Now, as I mentioned before, we got to talk about the Gen 7 car. What I'm about to discuss is from an article from Road and Track discussing some leaked information concerning updates to the new cars. I apologize if I botch your name, but it was from an article from Bozy Tatarevic on October 12th. I'm just going to quote directly from the article because he sums it up perfectly. The following are direct quotes from the article with the link in the description. The first change noted in the document is the introduction of the new rear bumper struts, which are triangular supports that hold the bumper beam to the rear clip. These struts will be replaced with a new part that will see material thickness changes to 0.080 inches in order for them to crumple better. I don't know what the thickness was prior to this, so I don't know. I can't really make a comparison. The rear clip and center section will not be replaced, but will be altered and updated. These changes will be done as these parts will be sent to the Technique Chassis, the single source vendor that builds and maintains these components for refurbishment. The costs for the fabrication, materials, and labor to make these updates during refurbishment will be covered by NASCAR, and teams will only be responsible for the usual finish work like painting. And as I talked about with team finances, I think that's a smart move on all fronts. The rear clip will see the removal of the longitudinal bars. God, it's been a long day. Along with a change to the lower rails, they now seem to be designed as compound mitred tubes. The bars sit parallel to the racing surface and contribute to the stiffness of overall chassis. Removing and modifying them should allow that area to crumple better in rear-end impacts. The center section has a number of changes, starting with the outer diagonal tubes in the rear. These bars will be replaced with the same cross-sectional tubes that now figure a trigger on the inboard side. The outer diagonal tubes on the bottom will be replaced with 1.75-inch diameter tubes that will feature a 0.65-inch wall along with the triggers. The inner diagonals will be reduced to 1-inch diameter tubes with a 0.65-inch wall without triggers. The intention of designing certain tubing with a trigger is typically to improve the ability to absorb impact energy in a progressive and controlled manner by local modification of the material properties. This is meant to allow the deformation of the material to be introduced precisely where the forces in the tubular structure to deform in a mode of high energy absorption and reduces the maximum load in a controlled manner. That's a mouthful right there. This is why the fact that these changes had to be made at the way they did and how they did is why drivers hate this new car. Now, never mind the fact that Rex ended both Alex Bowman and Kurt Busch's championship hopes and probably led to Kurt Busch announcing his retirement from full-time driving at the end of the season. In addition, the fact that Gen C cars tend to catch fire more easily is also a concerning problem. And while I've heard things about NASCAR about quote-unquote safety improvements, I have yet to hear anything about the fact that the cars tend to catch fire being addressed at the time of this recording. More time should have been focused on this car's development, and it's patently obvious that this car was rushed into production. Now, granted, you're not going to be able to... how do I explain this? You're not going to be able to test everything perfectly before you get the car into production and racing. I get that. There's going to be some stuff that happens during 500 miles an hour that you can't factor in during lab testing or even track testing. Okay, fine. I get that. But these things are actually inexcusable. You basically forced every team in NASCAR in the Cup Series to spend exorbitant amounts of money on a new car that was pretty much less safe than the old one. So, yeah, I don't think the Gen 7 car should have been introduced. I think I think there should have been much more testing and design and manufacturing. It was just rushed, and it's causing problems now. I guarantee you there's going to be other problems that come up in relation to the Gen 7 car. We just don't know about them yet. Okay, I need to calm down, so I'm going to take a quick break, and then we'll discuss fishing and quiet quitting when I come back. And I'm back. Now, I'm not into fishing at all. I don't know anything about fishing. I mean, I've been fishing a couple times, but it wasn't for me. But we're going to talk about fishing, specifically the Lake Erie Walleye Trail Tournament in Cleveland, Ohio. I don't know if it's in Cleveland, but it was around Cleveland, Ohio. Now, I don't know anything about fishing, especially competitive fishing. And one of the things that I learned in this is that the winners have caught fish, and one of the ways that they're judged is on the weight of the fish. I say this because two fishermen, Jacob Runyan and Chase Kaminsky, decided it would be a good idea to A, bring their own pre-caught fish and stuff them with lead weights and walleye fillets to win the tournament. Well, this strategy instantly backfired when the competition director, who realized very quickly that these fish were much heavier than they should be, cut the fish open and exposed the scheme instantly. Both were disqualified and cursed out and kicked out of the tournament. And they've since been indicted on felony charges of cheating, attempted grand theft, possession of criminal tools, as well as misdemeanor charges of unlawfully owning wild animals. This is just a hilarious situation because I wonder, how else did they think this was going to end? Did they really think that nobody would notice that the fish that they caught were several pounds heavier than they had any reason to be? Do you really think that did they really think the tournament organizers knew nothing about the fish in question or cheating? Why they thought this was going to work, I just can't understand for my life. But then, not only to be ousted for cheating in a viral video, which is bad enough, but to then be brought up on felony charges is just, well, God just hates you. I'm sorry. I guarantee you these guys are going to cut a plea deal because I don't see them lasting more than about 5 minutes if they do go to prison. And I hope they are forever banished from fishing. Not just from tournaments, but from fishing, period. You should never be able to have a fishing license again. No fishing licenses for you. So I want to go, with that out of the way, I want to go and revisit quiet quitting, which, if you don't know, it's a trend where you go into work every day and you do the minimum amount because you're there to do your work and not anything more than that because you aren't paid to. People do this because, amongst other reasons, they feel taken advantage of by the company, which is, that's been happening since people have been working for other people. That's been happening since the beginning of time. And they want a better work-life balance. Okay, I get a good work-life balance. I'm not going to argue that one. But in theory, this sounds like a great move. In reality, it isn't. Because you might think that doing the minimum amount and no more to maintain a balance works well to you. To the company, it's a much different story. If your company sees you as a Mr. or Mrs. Minimum, then enjoy your job because you're probably not going to have it for much longer. Oh, and by the way, as somebody who actually is more than a minimum guy, I can tell you that being a quiet quitter or a Mr. Minimum will get everyone else in your company to hate you because they'll have to clean up your mess. And I get the theory that if the minimum wasn't good enough, it wouldn't be the minimum. But if you want a good life with more money, you have to work more. If I was a boss and I had a quiet quitter And then I get told one day that I got to eliminate some members of my staff due to cutbacks. You really think I would keep any of them on? They'd be the first to go. I'm not going to fire somebody who does more work than they should to protect a guy who does the minimum. Oh, and your work record does tend to follow you around. So good luck getting a job after you've been fired for only doing the minimum. And I talk about this because we're giving kids today the impression that this is the way to go. You know, everything you can do, whatever you want to do. You know, we're giving kids the impression that it's all about them. And I had a conversation recently with a friend of mine, and your work record following you around is why I'm bringing this up. I was talking with an old friend from college recently on Facebook, and one of his family members was in the United States Army while we were in college together. Now, he didn't really grow up wanting to be in the United States Army, but it was the only option outside of big box retail he had after high school. After a year of working in the mess hall in pretty much not working in the mess hall in the U.S., he one day just said, screw it. He just left the base and never returned because he decided to leave. And the reason why he chose to leave is one of the most idiotic things I've ever heard in my life. He was sick and tired of doing menial, repetitive work every single day. Well, he just left the base one day and never returned, and was caught sometime later, served some time in the brig, and got a bad conduct discharge. Now, because of this, he can't get a job better than big box retail, and his work record hampers him. Now, first off, he left the military because he was tired of doing menial and repetitive work. What did you think you were signing up for in the first place? And if you hate repetitive work, you really need to wake up. I guarantee you the overwhelming majority of jobs in the world, you do repetitive work, the same thing day after day, week in and week out. But he's mad. He has an attitude that I really don't like. He's mad because his bad decisions have hampered his ability to get a better job. Boo-hoo. I had a teacher one time say to me that when you make the choice to be an idiot, you choose to accept everything that comes with it. You chose to leave. You chose to get caught. You chose to spend time in the brig. You chose to get a bad conduct discharge. Companies tend to pay attention to people and the kind of mistakes they make. Because I guarantee you, most respectable jobs aren't going to go to guys who spend time in jail and get fired for bad behavior. That's just the way it works. He's just another one of these guys who can't blame themselves for anything, which a lot of these quiet quitters are. Look, I get that you like to enjoy your hobbies, or you like going out and taking photographs, or cooking, or making stuff for your Etsy store. But if you want to put fun over work, do not think for a second you won't be noticed. Companies pay attention to your performance. And in my experience, the less you do, the less chance of survival you are. I said this last time, and I'll say it again. If you don't want to do more than the minimum, someone else will. You don't want to pick up the slack, someone else will. If you make it clear you won't work harder than you have to, someone else will. And when it comes time for raises or promotions to arrive, you won't get one, but someone else will. And I guarantee you a lot of the people who quiet quit are also the ones who cry and complain when they don't get promotions. They whine and cry and scream and piss and moan because they got passed over for a promotion when they have done nothing to justify it. They make themselves horrible workers, and then they wonder why nobody sees them as anything more than a horrible worker. And believe me, I've had to pick up slack from these kinds of people. It's enraging. It's a perfect way. That attitude is a perfect way to get your boss and your coworkers to hate you. And you better be prepared not to go anywhere in life, because nobody's going to give you a promotion for doing the minimum. It's just not how it works. But again, me. It's just enraging, and I'm sick of it. I'm sick of these kids thinking that, life's that, your company needs to value who you are, and your feelings matter. No, they don't. No, they don't. When you get your next paycheck, I'd like you to look at your employee number, because simply put, that's what you are to the company. Whatever your employee ID number is, that is what you are to the company. Companies don't have morals. You really think that you're this new amazing force that the world's ever seen? Ah, please. Your HR manager has seen dozens, if not hundreds of you. The strong survive, the weak don't. You might not like it, but that's how it works. I've worked with a lot of these people, so I understand how enraging it is. I mean, I take pride in my work. I get my work done the way it should be. I'm not worried about getting a promotion. I don't want to be promoted. I am perfectly happy doing what I am. But the difference is, I'm not complaining about it. These people who do the minimum get passed over promotions and whine. It's just, stop admiring yourself in the mirror and see yourself how the company sees you. And if that's too much for you to handle, enjoy being unemployed, because you will be quite frequently. And with that out of my system, I'm just going to end it here. I'm Dave Firestone. I'll see you next week for episode 42 of Driver Seat Plug Radio. Leave a like, comment, share, and subscribe.